Suicides do not think things are going to get better. Depression is the realization you have lost control of your life. We vote in a somewhat desperate attempt to make the future better. But to be depressed, and sometimes so depressed one kills oneself, means there is a memory of a better time. But there is another aspect to this. Why would anyone get depressed if there was no better or worse times? If being in jail was experienced the same as being a guest on a tropical island, external events would lack meaning. Even if your spouse left you, your kids hated you, and you had just lost your job and everything you worked for, what would it matter? Destitution and prosperity would have precisely the same impact. But events do have value. That being said, it is not truly the environment we are in or the physical elements in it that matter. A poor, happy home is better than a rich home in which everyone hates the other. This is why people say money is not everything. Money does not buy happiness. Poverty, however, does not guarantee happiness. It probably is better to be rich and unhappy than poor and unhappy. Is a harem girl kept in the immense wealth of a caliph's palace happier than a Kentucky lass living in a poor man's wooden shack surrounded by a loving family? Both the harem girl and the poor man's daughter are compelled to work. The work is stultifying and repetitious in both cases, but the harem girl's work is largely meaningless done as she waits for the caliph's pleasure. The poor girl's work may be less exotic and involve the care of pigs, and yet the reward is the improvement of her family's fortunes, as limited as they may be. Every issue and question resolve down to the same dynamic. It cannot be avoided. The liberal looks forward to a time when limits are removed and when boundaries are a thing of the past. Liberals are governed by emotion. One of the strongest emotions is fear, and so they will resort to draconian laws and autocratic methods to assuage their fear. The best representative of the liberal ideal is the Eastern potentate. Eastern mysticism and exotic colors and taste suits liberals. They want their imaginations and sexuality titillated. But their golden age is always in the future, which is why they are progressives. Even when religious zealots, they want a future in which their religion has no competition. This is not a period in which the world believes the same, it is simply a time when obedience has been achieved. Conservatives do want things to be better, but they do feel there was a past to model the future on. Conservatives, far more than liberals, believe something was lost and needs to be regained. This is a bizarre idea for liberals who want nothing more than to destroy the past and all it represents. It is indeed this war between the right and left and between East and West that best explains the very difference that gives rise to the war. The pivotal point is ownership and sort of rights attached to property. Liberals believe we have positive rights and conservatives embrace the negative form of property rights. Liberals believe we have a right to life and liberty and property. Conservatives believe we have a right not to be deprived of what is ours. The liberal is free to pursue and acquire and claim what he wants. The conservative pursues what he wants as a man among equals, but he does not expect any quarter as he feels less that he has rights as abilities. A conservative believes he can overcome the opposition. His sense of justice tells him that what he earns fairly he ought to have a right to. In other words, everyone ought to fight fairly. In the conservative understanding of the world, we all struggle against the forces of nature and the natural obtuseness of others, but what we achieve belongs to us. No one has a right to claim anything we achieved. But what does this do to democracy, which, like autocracy, grants unlimited power to the majority? Democracy ought to be renamed demonocracy, as it has largely become a platform for destroying everything good and decent using the liberal majority. The question is, who has the right to rule? The answer is, rule what? We have authority only over what we create. We have no right to anything created by others. The Golden Age was a time when we had the freedom to choose, not because the law permitted it, but because the law did not need to be factored in. We controlled our destiny. Times were hard, but they were hard based on natural conditions. The market was the central element of our social experience. If times were hard, they were hard because the market was done and what we produced did not fetch high prices. We were not in control, but we knew what was going on and what would fix things. Hard work meant something. We knew we had to produce more of what others wanted. They may not have the money to pay, but with everyone working and everyone trying, over time things got better. Perhaps too better because the vultures moved in. A return to the golden age is not answered by repeating the answer to how do we create a golden age. We are in the spoiled and corrupted carcass of the golden age. Rot has set in, and the problem is how to remove the infection. Democracy gives vultures access to our living body. The people have no jurisdiction over my creations. Their existence does not give them any rights to wealth they did not create. Who decides who has merit, who has rights? Is it he who has the guns and the greater capacity to destroy those who would oppose him? How do we get past this reliance of brute force and the doctrine that might makes right and ends justify the means? Over the door of every government in every land is inscribed in deep, capital letters the phrase known as the dual doctrine of power. Might makes right and the end justifies the means. But nothing is more offensive or disturbing to any government than citizens that adopt this motto as their own guiding principle. Citizens must follow the law and the mores of the land while governments run roughshod over every impediment and obstruction. Otherwise, government might be put at a disadvantage. Governments are not citizens and subjects are not owners. The entire system of governance that the West has been put under is a scam fostered on sovereign citizens. The citizen is the creator and owner of political entities, as these are essentially markets. Canada is a market, and the market is owned by the purveyors of goods and services. The weakness of democracy is that while it takes nothing to vote for free coffee for all, someone has to make the coffee. Every form of government is timocratic. What is at issue is to what degree. Those with property always hold the power. A true timocracy is based on true and rightful property ownership. In a democracy, the only property that is considered is the adult body. But why ought the possession of an adult body be sufficient justification for having a say in how the resources of the body politic are allocated? The Democratic Party links political power with property. The more property, the more political power collectively and individually. The party seeks power for the party and individual party members through greater control over greater swaths of property. We endeavor to restore the golden age in which we were free to create value and to control the value we created. The Democratic Constitution states, all men are created free and without obligation to others, and are justified without limit, to create and allocate as he or she sees fit, and this is without let or hindrance or obligation, understanding there is no right to claim value created by another or others. This condition applies to all assets and equity up to and including all those natural assets that encompass the world and our universe, which were solely created by and therefore the sole responsibility of Almighty God. All men are created equal under God with the obligation to create if we would eat. We are known by our works, and our works are the wealth we create. We are under no obligation to create for others, but in our endeavors, we thrive by dealing fairly with others. Wealth is not formed in isolation, but by means of trade. We create that which is needed by others, and it is by means of demand that value is attached to what is done by us. All prosperity and progress is the result of specialization, which is simply each one of us making ourselves useful to our fellow citizens in a way best suited to us and our God-given gifts. The democratic movement looks for people who think political power ought to be conditioned upon economic power. All social goods must be paid for. Ultimately, it is those who create the equity that create for the goods provided. The power belongs to the producers of equity, not to the consumers of equity. If you create good things, if you add value to the world through your work, it benefits you to support the democratic movement.